Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. It is getting towards the end of February and it's very spring-like here in the greenhouse. Today I'm going to be repotting my royal oak trees. They're English oaks, and I haven't repotted them for 4 years. I can't believe it's been that long. I'll show you a quick recap of when I repotted them last in 2020.
All the roots look good and healthy, so we'll take that over to the washing station and get them cleaned up. All right, here I go. Here's a look at the roots on these oak trees, and you'll notice that there's just one big taproot that runs down and a few fine roots coming off of it. And I've dealt with these kind of roots before on an oak. What I did is I just cut the taproot in half, and then I got a nice fine radial root system developing on the roots that remain. So it developed really nicely, and I'll do the same today. And then my largest one, it has a lot more fine roots up at the top, so I'm going to be quite daring because I don't want this curve here eventually. So I'm going to come in and prune it off right here. Rather severe, but here I go. And that's what I'll plant. Hopefully it'll survive. Now I will trim some of these longer roots off. I'll just prune those ones off. So that is now ready to plant, just like that. I'm going to plant these all together in one pot. So I'll need to pick a front for this tree. And I think I'll have the main part of the trunk forward. This one off to here, right about there. I will make sure my roots are nice and radial, comb them out before I add the soil. These will all become surface roots eventually, and then I'll put some soil in to stabilize the tree in the pot. The next one, because it's smaller, I'll plant it further back in the planting. So I think maybe there, maybe there. And the third one, that's kind of all in a line, isn't it? Plant the third one in the back. I'll change it around like that. I think that looks pretty good. I'll fill it in and we'll see. I'm out front now looking at the arrangement. It doesn't look very good, does it? I like the number one tree, the tallest tree. It looks really good. I think the smallest one needs to be closer to it. And the biggest one and the second biggest are too evenly spaced in the pot. So I think everything's got to be moved more towards the main tree, sort of as more of a clump style rather than kind of spread out. So I'll change that around. Now let's see how that looks. That's much better. I think that looks fine for now. I mean, these trees will grow and they'll change, and I don't know what the final planting will be of all these, but for now, you make them look as good as you can.
That was a look back at my royal oaks back in 2020. So today I'll be doing the second root pruning of them. It'll be interesting to see what the roots look like after 4 years. Here is a look at the 2 trees today. I originally had 3 trees, a small one back here, but that one didn't make it. So I'm left with 2 trees now. These are my oldest royal oak trees. They're grown from a seed, and this will be going into their 5th year now. I've been pruning the lower branches off of these trees to get a nice, clean, smooth trunk line on them. So I'll continue that strategy, just keeping my branches higher up on the trees. And my intent is to grow these into a medium to a large size bonsai eventually. So step number 1 will be getting the trees out of the pot. I'm repotting these trees now because the buds are just starting to become active. You can see on some of them there's some leaves just starting to come out, but most of them are still dormant, but they're ready to grow anytime now. So that's the reason I'm repotting them in February. The trees are telling me it's time, and here in the greenhouse I can keep them warm after the repotting, so they'll be happy until spring arrives. Alright, it's time to get the trees out of the pot. Let's see if they're locked in here or if they're fairly loose. These trees are going in a 3D printed pot, and the file is available on Thingiverse for free. You can download it and print it out, and you can scale it up or down, make any size pot you want. This is printed with PLA plastic, and you can see over the years it's kind of warped a bit. That's the one disadvantage of printing with PLA plastic, is it's not very stable. And after, a certain number of years, the plastic starts breaking down. So I'll be taking it out of this 3D printed pot today and putting it into a ceramic pot. So it's in there pretty good. This PLA pot is it's still hanging together, but I'm sure it won't last too much longer. It's been in this pot for 4 years, and I'm sure the pot will be starting to disintegrate soon. Yeah, it's really locked in here. There it goes. Okay, so the pot looks like it's in fairly good shape still. It could be used as a training pot. And there's the trees. I can see some of the roots are just starting to become active. You can see the white tips on them, but generally they're all dormant still, the roots. So it is a good time to repot these trees. I'll peel all the moss off the surface. Oh, and I already see my crane fly larva. There's one here, there's one here. There's a close-up of these larvae. They're quite dormant because it's cool in the greenhouse here, but yeah, so these things, they mostly eat the moss, but they will eat roots if they're hungry. I'll begin combing out the roots in the soil, and we'll see what has grown, what the root system looks like. So these trees, they should have been repotted probably every 2 years when they're young. 4 years is a little long to go. There's another crane fly larva. Yeah, I'm sure they're quite root bound in this pot. I can tell the soil isn't very crumbly. It's packed with roots, which can be a good thing. We'll see. We'll see if if the roots are really out of balance. The last time I repotted, I removed a lot of the taproot, but I kept some of it. It's always wise to cut your taproot in half at first, the first repotting, and then let those lateral roots grow, the radial roots, and then you can clean up the bottom of the tree once it has a good root system established, and just improve the root system over the years, working away at them, always striving to get a beautiful radial root base. And you'll notice I'm combing in a radial direction, so I don't tear any radial roots. I'm only tearing crossing roots, and that keeps all those nice roots you want to keep intact, and all the matted crossing roots get combed out and cleaned out, so you're left with a pretty good looking root system. You can also see in here that the perlite is broken down quite a bit. That it acts a lot like akadama, that the roots grow into the perlite particles and they break them up into smaller and smaller particles as the tree matures in the soil, and you get a finer and finer soil as you leave the tree to grow, which is good. It especially if you're starting to refine the trees, it helps miniaturize them by keeping those soil smart particles small, and your fine root system grows in them. Perlite, I think, is an inexpensive substitute for akadama. I can't afford to use akadama. It's too expensive here. The number of trees I have, I couldn't afford it. I would go broke
And you know, maybe sometime in the future with some of my more refined trees, I'll try Akadama out, but so far, you know, this soil I use seems to work really well. So it's inexpensive, so I keep using it. Wow, there's some thick roots down here. I'll feed the crane fly larvae to the chickens now so I don't forget about them. I'll just wet down my roots to make sure they're staying hydrated. They are in the sun here now. And I'll continue combing them out. A very difficult task. These trees were left far too long between repotting. Now, I've got 2 of these drainage screens out, but there's still 2 more tangled in the roots in here. That one root, wow, is that ever thick? It's thicker than the trunk. Yeah, there's just roots have grown through the drainage screens. It's coming. Yeah, not an easy repotting, this one. That's what happens if you leave them too long. Repotting becomes very difficult. Oh, there's one more out. Here's another part of one. Okay, I think there's just the one drainage screen in here, one of these coarse ones. There it comes. There, I got it out. Wow, that was really tangled in there. The 2 trees are still quite firmly attached to each other. The roots are kind of intertwined, so I will have to separate the 2 trees. I'm going to try and separate the 2 trees now. They're kind of loose with each other, but there's a lot of roots that are intertwined. But if I can get them separated, I think I'll have a better chance of finding the roots, identifying which ones need pruning and which ones don't. It's coming. There's just a bit of tangulation in here, if that's a word. Yeah, they're definitely loose with each other. Yeah, they're loose. There we go. I think it's coming now. Wow, look at that root there. Holy. Wow. I'm thinking that thick root is off the small tree. I am thinking it is. Holy. So there they are. They're separated now. And that big thick root is off this skinny little tree. Oh my goodness. Let me clean up. Yeah, so here is a look at my root system. So the small tree has that big, thick root. Wow. But there's lots of fine roots too. And the larger tree has a better root system. It's a little more balanced. There's no big, thick roots on it. So, the first step, I think, is to get rid of that great big giant root off of the small tree. And I'll need to find out where it comes from, which is right in here. So a root like this, I have 2 choices. I could remove it totally, and I think there's enough fine roots to support the tree. Or I could leave part of it and then, with the next repotting, prune it back. But I think in this case, because there's so many fine roots here,
I can take it totally off, so I'll do that. So here I go. I'm going to come in and just prune it off. Big root cut coming up. Here I go. Done. So there is that root. Wow, I still can't believe that. That's just amazing, you know, for this size of a tree to have a root like that. That's just incredible. So that can go in the compost pile, and I can continue to comb out the roots that are left and see what I have. Okay, and then I'll work on the big tree. So there is one, you know, fairly thick root on the larger tree, but it's not too bad. I mean, I'll prune it away, but definitely has a better balanced root system, the larger tree. Okay, so once again, I'm going to clean up. I don't like working and, you know, on roots in a messy pile of soil. And I would like to wash these roots, so I think I'll have to do that outside with the watering can. So I'll do that. I'll wash the roots with the watering can, you know, get as much soil away from them as I can, clean up, and then do some more combing, and then start root pruning. Alright, I'm going to start the root pruning now. I've cleaned up the trees, kind of washed the roots off of the watering can. They're not very clean, but it's enough that I can start the root pruning. So here's a root that grows out in a nice radial direction, and then it takes a corner, so I'll prune it off shorter, like that. There's a root on the bottom, it's down too low. I'm going to prune that off short, like that. There's also another root here that's grown out, hit the edge of the pot. It needs to be pruned off shorter. You can see it starts from in here. It's looking good until about here, so I'll prune that part of it off, like that. There's another large root here that's quite a nice root, actually. The only problem is it's a beautiful root, but it's a little thick. You can also see where it's hit the edge of the pot and then followed the pot around in the rectangular shape. So I'm just going to prune this one back to here. You know, a fairly big cut, but there's part of the root is still left. So that's starting to get it cleaned up. There's a root here that goes a funny direction. I'll prune it off short, like that. And then I need to do a bit more combing to remove the soil here and see what's going on. Okay, so there's my root system on the small tree. So I have, there's some buds up here I'm going to remove. I don't want like a multi-trunk tree. And there's some lumps here of, I think they're branches I removed. There were suckers coming up from the base of the tree. I'm going to clean those up. So I'm going to come in here and just prune off all these nubs. In an effort to get, you know, a fairly smooth looking trunk. It'll have a lot of scars that'll heal over in the future, but at least it'll be kind of smooth and flowing. It won't be have all these protrusions sticking out of it, which wouldn't look so good. Okay, so now on the root base, you can see, you know, the trunk thickens up right to the base down here where that big thick root was. So I think some of these upper roots can get pruned away. They're a little high, some of them. I think even this one's too high.
This one here, some fine roots there. These ones I think are too high also, so I'm going to have to prune those away. Trying to establish, you know, a radial root plane down here. And also trying to keep enough roots to keep the tree alive and healthy. There's one here that's growing in a funny direction. I think that one might be okay. No, I'm going to get rid of it. And then I'll just trim some of these longer ones back. And I think, you know, that's pretty good. That's a good looking root base on the tree now. So I'll set that one aside and I'll start on the large tree. So the large tree has a pretty good looking root base, at least from what I see so far. There's a lot of good roots, a lot of nice trunk flare. I would definitely say, you know, my radial root base can be developed from these surface roots here. And whatever is growing down here will require some pruning. So I'm going to start, you can see there's one thick root here that's growing from the bottom of the tree. I'm going to remove that. That'll be my first step. And I'm just going to cut it off now for now, and then I may be able to clean that cut up later on. So that gets rid of that thick root. There's a few roots under here. This one's crossing the bottom of the tree. Get rid of that. There's one coming straight down here I can remove. And then that one I cut off, I think I can cut it back shorter. Once I clean it out and see where that root comes from. So right in here, you can see it now. So that we can get pruned off much shorter to here. So here I go. That gets rid of that stub of that big root. And then there's another few roots in here growing straight down that I can remove. They're not so big. Getting that root base flat on the bottom. That's pretty good. Okay. I'll do a little cleanup and then we'll come back, prune the surface roots. Alright, you can see the root base is sitting quite flat now on the bottom, and you want the top tapering into the soil, flowing into the soil. Okay, so now it's time to prune these roots. So my first one here is too long. I'm going to prune it back to here. This one's a bit too long. I'll prune it back to here. Prune that one back. These ones. Getting rid of these long ends on the roots. There's a few root hairs sticking up here I can get rid of. There's a root here. You can see it comes 90 degrees to the trunk. It doesn't flow down into the soil, so I'll remove that one. This one also doesn't really flow down into the soil, so I'm going to remove it. These ones aren't bad. There's one sticking up here though that I gotta get rid of. Like that. There's a few root hairs here sticking up that I'll get rid of. Few kind of crossing roots there that were wrapping around the trunk. You don't want those thickening up. Strangler roots. They don't really strangle the tree too much, but they will thicken up and look ugly as they wrap around the trunk. So the rest of it's looking pretty good. A few roots on the bottom I could trim back. And I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good looking root base. Not bad for the second root pruning of this tree. So, yeah. So that's ready to plant. Both trees have kind of been reduced to a radial root base. Okay. So next I have to pick a pot, and I have two options. I can pot them as individual trees, or I can plant them together again. I'll see what pot I have.
I went looking for pots outside and I found this mica pot here. It's not too deep. It's quite large for these two trees, but I think it'll give the roots lots of room to grow. It's a pretty good size, I think, to develop these trees to the next level. So that's the pot I'll use. So I'll get the pot cleaned up. It's a bit dirty at the moment, and then we'll come back and plant the trees. I've got my drainage screens in the pot. The pot's cleaned up. I scrubbed it, but it's still a little, it's got some patina, let's say. So I'll add a base layer of soil to the bottom of the pot. And it'll take quite a bit of soil in here. Okay, I think that's a good level to plant the trees. So I'll start, I'm going to plant both trees in this pot, and I think I'll put the large tree here. Maybe, let me pick the front of it. I think somewhere here was the front. So maybe the large tree over here so this branch gets light, and the smaller tree maybe the opposite direction, and kind of set it back just a little bit more like that. So I'll just check my roots are combed out before I start adding soil in. Make sure there's no tangled roots. They're kind of flowing outwards. I think that's good. Okay, I'll begin adding soil. Make sure my trees are vertical. Somewhere about there. Let's just step back and have a look at it. There's a look at the two trees in the pot. They've got lots of room to grow. So I think that'll be quite good. So I'll keep filling it up with soil, and then I'll check the height of the trees, make sure they're looking good. It's a good thing I mixed up lots of soil, because this pot uses a lot. I'm just checking the height of the trees in the pot. I think it's pretty good. You can just start to see the flare at the base of the trees. The roots are safely in the soil. So I'll continue filling it in, topping the soil up. And then I'll just work that soil into the roots, make sure there's no air pockets. Usually with these flat radial root bases, they're not a lot of air pockets in them because they lay flat on the soil. But it's a good idea to work it in the best you can. And you can always tell by how much the tree wiggles. If it wiggles, there's air pockets.
If it feels firm, you know you've got soil surrounding all the roots. And when the soil is nice and dry like this, it flows around the roots quite well. Yeah, they feel good in the pot. They're nice and firm. Okay, so that needs watering. So let's get out the watering can and give the trees a water. All right, here I go with the water. You can hear that soil sucking up the water, absorbing it. Nothing coming out the drainage holes yet, but I think soon. There it comes. It looks nice and clear, which shows there's not much dust in the soil. It's quite good. And again, I'll water this several times today, making sure that soil's soaking up all the water. I'll rotate the trees around so you can see them from all angles. So here is the current front of them, coming around to the right hand side, to the back, the left hand side, and back to the front. It is a beautiful day here in the bonsai zone. I will be placing stones on the surface of the soil of the royal oaks, but my stone collection here is buried under the snow. It is supposed to warm up in the next few days, and I'll have access to them, and I'll do that. I'll place stones on the surface of the soil just to hold them in place until the roots get established in the pot. I think these two oak trees have a good chance of success after this repotting. It was the right time of the year. The buds were swelling and the leaves were just starting to emerge. They had a fairly good root system left on them after the root pruning. So hopefully all will go well. You never know. All you can do is, trust the process and the timing, and whatever happens, happens. It's time for today's updates, and I'll show you the trident maple. I repotted that quite recently, and you can see on the top of it there's all kinds of leaves coming out. Very exciting. The Korean maple, the buds are swelling. It should be leafing out soon. And the hawthorn, after its repotting, it's hanging in there. Looking good so far anyway. I really enjoyed the process of growing miniature trees from seeds. And these two royal oaks, I hope, will be an example for the future, where you'll see them slowly transform from seedlings into more mature looking trees eventually. My two oldest royal oaks that I started from seeds are repotted, and I was quite happy with the root base on both of them after the root pruning. It was a bit of a surprise, that one really thick root on the smallest tree. And it wasn't a really easy repotting because I had left it too long, 4 years. I should have repotted it every 2 years. But I think they're back on track, ready to grow for spring. And I think they've taken a big step forward today, getting those roots sorted out once again. And I think they'll have a good season this year. So that is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.